When you watch someone long enough, you begin to notice a strange pattern. They are never more honest than when they are frightened, and never more revealed than when they believe they are unseen. Everything else is performance. What most people call character is a costume stitched together from learned behaviors, borrowed morals, and rehearsed responses. It is the mask worn to survive, to belong, to avoid rejection. But the psyche is not fooled by its own disguises. Beneath every polished identity lives a quieter force, older than language, older than social rules. It watches, it remembers, and it speaks, not through words, but through reactions the mind cannot fully control. If you wish to see who someone truly is, you must stop listening to what they say about themselves. Words are conscious tools, shaped to protect an image. Instead, observe the moments when the unconscious takes the wheel. These moments are rare, brief, and often uncomfortable. Yet they reveal more than years of conversation ever could. The first thing to watch is how a person responds when their inner equilibrium is disturbed, when they are contradicted, criticized, delayed, or denied. Not the grand crises they prepare for, but the small, almost invisible frustrations that slip past their defenses. The second thing is how they treat what cannot fight back: weakness, vulnerability, dependence, silence. These two reveal the architecture of the soul. Everything else is decoration. A human being is not defined by their ideals, but by their reflexes. Reflexes are born where thought has not yet intervened, where the body remembers what the mind has forgotten. Long before a belief forms, the nervous system reacts. Long before a value is declared, the muscles tighten, the breath shortens, the jaw clenches. Trauma lives there, fear lives there, and so does truth. When pressure enters the system, the mask cracks. The unconscious, burdened with suppressed rage, unprocessed grief, and denied desire, pushes upward. The shadow, everything the person refuses to acknowledge about themselves, begins to leak out, and it leaks not as confession, but as irritation, contempt, withdrawal, control. Watch carefully. A person who becomes cruel under mild stress carries cruelty within them that has never been faced. A person who collapses into helplessness at the first sign of resistance has learned that weakness is safer than agency. A person who must dominate when challenged is fleeing from a deep, unspoken terror of insignificance. These reactions are not choices. They are strategies formed long ago, often in childhood, when the psyche learned what it must become to survive. The body remembers these lessons even when the mind denies them. That is why people repeat the same emotional patterns while insisting they want something different. The conscious ego wants peace, connection, meaning. The unconscious wants safety. And safety, once defined by pain, is very difficult to unlearn. This is why observation must replace judgment. Judgment remains on the surface. Observation descends. When you observe someone's reactions without attempting to correct them, you begin to see the internal war they are fighting. You see how much energy is spent holding the self together. You see the cost of avoidance. Most people avoid themselves with remarkable dedication. They distract, intellectualize, spiritualize, or numb. They build identities strong enough to keep the shadow buried. But the shadow does not disappear. It waits, it gathers strength, and it emerges precisely when the ego is tired, threatened, or distracted. The unconscious always chooses the moment of least resistance. This is why true character cannot be found in comfort. Comfort allows the ego to remain in control. It is when comfort is disrupted that the deeper layers surface. And it is there, in those subtle moments of disruption, that the first truth appears. The second truth is more difficult to witness because it requires patience and silence. It reveals itself not in reaction, but in attitude. Watch how a person relates to what offers them no advantage. Watch how they treat those who cannot elevate their status, mirror their identity, or fulfill their needs. Watch how they behave when there is nothing to gain. Here, the shadow speaks differently. A person who is kind only when observed is not kind, they are careful. A person who listens only to those they admire does not value truth, they value reflection. A person who respects strength but despises fragility is at war with their own vulnerability. These are not moral failures, they are psychological confessions. The psyche always projects what it cannot tolerate within itself. What is rejected inwardly is attacked outwardly. What is denied internally is controlled externally. This is why contempt is such a powerful indicator of inner conflict. When someone consistently belittles weakness, sensitivity, or uncertainty, it is because these qualities exist within them, demanding acknowledgement. The body reacts to this denial. Muscles tighten to suppress emotion. Breath becomes shallow to avoid feeling. The nervous system remains on alert, scanning for threats that resemble the disowned self. Over time, this constant vigilance becomes exhausting. Yet many prefer exhaustion to self-confrontation. To treat another with dignity when they have nothing to offer is to have made peace with one's own shadow. It means the individual no longer needs to prove their worth by comparison. They are not haunted by the fear that they are only valuable under certain conditions. This peace is rare, not because it is difficult to achieve, but because it requires something most people resist: honest self-examination. Self-examination is not self-criticism. It is the willingness to sit with what arises without immediately justifying, explaining, or suppressing it. It is the courage to notice envy without acting on it, anger without projecting it, fear without disguising it as reason. This inner discipline shapes character more than any moral code ever could. Yet the modern psyche is deeply uncomfortable with stillness. Silence invites the unconscious to speak, and what it has to say is often unwelcome. It speaks of unresolved loss, of unlived lives, of choices made out of fear rather than truth. To hear this voice requires a strength that does not announce itself. That strength becomes visible in how one treats the fragile, both within and without. Those who have integrated their own vulnerability do not need to dominate, dismiss, or exploit. They do not fear the tears of others, because they have made room for their own. They do not mock uncertainty, because they have sat with it. They do not rush to fix, because they understand that some wounds heal only when they are allowed to breathe. Such individuals are not perfect. They are not free from darkness, but they are no longer possessed by it. Possession is what occurs when the shadow remains unconscious. It expresses itself through behavior, while the ego claims innocence. I didn't mean it. That's not who I am, I was just tired. These statements may be factually true, yet psychologically irrelevant. Meaning is not found in intention, but in pattern. Patterns reveal the deeper self. When someone repeatedly harms, withdraws, manipulates, or avoids under similar conditions, the psyche is speaking clearly. It is describing a structure, not an accident. To see this structure is to understand character. And to understand character is not to condemn, but to see where awareness has not yet reached. Awareness is transformative not because it fixes, but because it reveals. Once revealed, the unconscious loses its compulsive power. What is seen can be worked with. What remains hidden controls. This is why denial is so fiercely defended. To admit one's shadow is to risk the collapse of an identity built around being good, strong, or right. Yet the collapse of a false identity is not destruction. It is a necessary disintegration. Without it, growth is impossible. True character is not clean, it is not simple, it is forged through repeated encounters with inner conflict, not through avoidance of it. Those who refuse this work may appear functional, successful, even admirable, but under pressure, they fracture, and around weakness, they reveal their fear. The psyche always returns to its unresolved material. It circles it, dreams it, projects it, repeats it. Life itself becomes a mirror, reflecting the same lessons until they are learned. So when you observe another, do not be distracted by their narrative. Watch their reactions when control slips. Watch their treatment of what cannot reward them. In these two places, the unconscious leaves its fingerprints. And when you turn this observation inward, something profound occurs. You begin to notice your own reflexes, your own aversions, your own moments of contempt, withdrawal, or control. This is not comfortable, but it is honest. Honesty with oneself is the beginning of individuation, the slow, often painful process of becoming whole. Wholeness does not mean harmony at all times. It means the capacity to hold contradiction without fragmentation, to contain light and darkness without pretending one does not exist. In the end, character is not what you display when you are certain of who you are. It is what emerges when that certainty dissolves. It is what remains when you are tired, threatened, unseen. It is how you relate to fragility, because fragility reminds you of your own. To see this clearly is not to judge humanity harshly, but to understand it deeply. And understanding, when it is honest, has a quiet gravity. It does not shout. It does not persuade. It simply stands, heavy with truth, waiting for those willing to feel it. The disturbance of inner equilibrium is rarely dramatic. It does not announce itself with catastrophe. More often, it arrives as something trivial, a delay, a contradiction, a boundary, a word spoken in the wrong tone. These moments are small enough that the ego does not prepare its defenses, and yet strong enough to activate the deeper layers of the psyche. And it is precisely here that the first cracks appear. Most people believe they know who they are because they know how they behave when life is stable. This is a dangerous illusion. Stability allows the personality to function on habit. The conscious mind follows rehearsed scripts, learned responses, socially rewarded behaviors. But character is not built in stability. It is exposed in disruption. The nervous system reacts before thought intervenes. A perceived threat, whether real or symbolic, activates ancient physiological mechanisms. The heart rate changes, muscles contract, breathing becomes shallow or erratic, blood flow shifts. These responses evolved long before modern identity, long before moral reasoning. They are not concerned with truth or fairness, they are concerned with survival. What matters psychologically is not the objective severity of the threat, but what it resembles. The unconscious does not recognize time, it responds to patterns. A mild criticism today can activate the same bodily response as humiliation decades ago. A delayed reply can awaken the same fear as abandonment. The body remembers what the mind has buried. This is why certain reactions seem disproportionate, why someone erupts with anger over something small, why another collapses into silence or compliance when challenged. These are not overreactions, they are precise reactions to something the conscious mind no longer sees. When pressure enters the system, the psyche defaults to its earliest successful defense. Whatever once protected the individual from pain becomes the automatic response. For some, it is aggression. For others, withdrawal. For others still, intel, actualization, sarcasm, charm, or control. These strategies solidify into identity traits and are later mistaken for personality. But personality is only the visible surface of adaptation. To observe how someone reacts when disturbed is to witness their original wounds speaking through their present behavior. The wound does not speak in words. It speaks in tone, posture, timing, intensity. It speaks through what cannot be held back. Notice the person who must always be right when contradicted. Beneath this insistence lies a fragile sense of self, built on conditional worth. Being wrong does not feel like a mistake. It feels like annihilation. The body reacts accordingly. Tension rises. The voice sharpens, the nervous system prepares for battle, not because the argument matters, but because the self feels threatened. Notice the person who becomes passive, agreeable, or self-erasing when conflict arises. This is not kindness, it is survival. Somewhere in their history, resistance led to punishment or abandonment. The body learned that safety lies in disappearance. Compliance becomes instinctual. The self retreats before it can be attacked. Notice the one who responds to frustration with mockery or detachment. Humor and distance become shields. Feeling is avoided because feeling once overwhelmed the system. The psyche learned that connection is dangerous when it comes with vulnerability, so it keeps everything light, ironic, untouchable. These responses are not conscious choices. They are embodied memories. And because they are unconscious, the individual often defends them fiercely. To question the reaction feels like questioning the self. This is why people justify behavior that clearly harms them and others. The defense is older than logic. When you watch these reactions without judgment, something important becomes visible. The individual is not reacting to the present moment, but to a past that is still alive in their body. The shadow carries this past. It is composed not only of morally rejected traits, but of emotions that were never allowed full expression. Anger suppressed becomes bitterness. Grief suppressed becomes numbness. Fear suppressed becomes control. The psyche does not eliminate what is suppressed, it displaces it, and displacement always distorts. The unconscious seeks expression. If it cannot express directly, it expresses indirectly. This is why people sabotage relationships they claim to want, provoke conflicts they insist they hate, repeat patterns they swear they are trying to escape. The psyche is attempting to resolve unfinished business. Under pressure, this unfinished business surfaces. What is revealing is not that someone becomes angry, anxious, or withdrawn. These are human reactions. What reveals character is how aware the person is of what is happening within them. Awareness creates a pause. In that pause, choice becomes possible. Without awareness, reaction is inevitable. Most people do not pause. They identify completely with their reaction. I am angry because you are wrong. I shut down because you are too much. I control because things must be done properly. The external world is blamed for an internal state. This protects the ego from having to confront the underlying wound. Yet the body continues to carry the cost. Chronic tension, fatigue, irritability, restlessness. These are not merely lifestyle issues. They are signs of unresolved psychological conflict. The nervous system remains activated long after the original threat has passed. The individual lives as if something terrible is about to happen, even when nothing is. This constant state of readiness shapes character more than conscious intention ever could. It narrows perception. It reduces empathy. It prioritizes self-protection over understanding. And because it operates below awareness, it feels justified. Observe how a person behaves when plans change unexpectedly, when their expectations are disrupted, when they are asked to wait, when they are told no. These situations remove control, however briefly. Control is the ego's favorite illusion. It gives the feeling of safety without addressing the underlying fear. When control is lost, fear emerges. Some respond with irritation masked as efficiency, others with anxiety disguised as concern, others with anger framed as honesty. The mask may differ, but the mechanism is the same. The system feels unsafe. The unconscious takes over. It is here that chara, CTR, reveals its true center of gravity, not in what the person claims to value, but in what they protect at all costs. What they protect reveals what they fear losing, and what they fear losing reveals what was once taken, threatened, or denied. This observation requires emotional neutrality. If you personalize another's reaction, you miss its meaning. Their response is not about you, it is about a memory stored in their nervous system. To see this clearly is to step out of the drama and into understanding. Understanding does not excuse harm, but it explains it, and explanation is the first step toward seeing reality as it is, rather than as the ego wants it to be. The same observation must eventually be turned inward. This is where resistance intensifies. It is easier to analyze others than to watch one's own reactions without defense. Yet the same principles apply. Notice what triggers you disproportionately. Notice where your body tightens before your mind speaks. Notice the stories you tell yourself immediately after reacting. These stories are attempts to restore a coherent identity after it has been shaken. If you are honest, you will find familiar patterns. You will see how quickly the mind justifies, blames, minimizes. This is not failure. It is the psyche doing what it has always done to survive. But survival is not the same as living. Character begins to transform only when the individual can remain present with discomfort without immediately acting it out. This presence allows the unconscious material to rise without possessing behavior. The shadow, once seen, loses its compulsive force. This does not happen through force or moral effort. It happens through sustained attention, through the willingness to feel what was once too much to feel, through allowing the body to complete responses that were interrupted long ago. When this process begins, reactions soften, not because the person becomes passive, but because they are no longer defending against ghosts. The present moment becomes distinguishable from the past. Choice returns. A person with integrated awareness still experiences anger, fear, frustration, but these states move through them rather than defining them. The body responds, but the self is not overwhelmed. This is the quiet strength that reveals mature character. Until then, reactions will continue to speak louder than words. They will reveal what the individual believes they have overcome but have only buried. They will expose the places where identity is still built on defense rather than truth. To watch reactions is to watch the unconscious in motion. It is to see the psyche as it truly is, alive, adaptive, wounded, intelligent. And in this seeing, something shifts. The need to judge diminishes, the need to understand deepens, because beneath every reaction is a history asking to be acknowledged. What cannot be reacted to is often acted out elsewhere. The psyche is economical in this way. When an impulse is forbidden expression, it does not disappear. It searches for another route. And the most revealing route is how a person treats what they perceive as weaker than themselves. Power dynamics expose character with ruthless clarity. When you observe how someone behaves toward those who cannot retaliate, impress, or offer advantage, you are witnessing the moral structure of their inner world, not their stated ethics, but their lived psychology. This is where the shadow no longer hides behind stress or justification. It relaxes. It feels safe enough to reveal itself. The unconscious always seeks asymmetry. Where there is imbalance, it can express what has been restrained. Consider how a person treats vulnerability. Not only the vulnerability of others, but vulnerability itself as a concept. Do they grow impatient with it? Do they mock it, avoid it, pathologize it, or romanticize it? Each response reveals a relationship to their own denied fragility. Those who despise weakness have learned that weakness is dangerous. Somewhere in their history, vulnerability led to pain, shame, or loss of control. The psyche responded by building armor. Over time, the armor hardened into identity. Strength became virtue not because it was chosen, but because it was necessary. But armor isolates, and what isolates eventually turns inward. The contempt directed outward is first practiced inwardly. The individual who cannot tolerate another's uncertainty cannot tolerate their own. The one who demands constant competence from others' lives under relentless self-surveillance. Mercy is absent because it was never received. This internal severity becomes visible in subtle ways. Impatience with mistakes, irritation at slowness, discomfort with emotional expression that cannot be neatly resolved. These reactions are not about efficiency or standards. They are about fear of collapse. The psyche fears that if softness is allowed, the structure will fail. Now observe the opposite extreme, the person who over-identifies with weakness, who rescues compulsively, who cannot allow others to struggle, who derives identity from being needed. This too reveals a shadow. Here, power is disguised as care. Control is masked as compassion. This pattern often emerges where autonomy was punished, where the self learned that being strong led to rejection, But being indispensable led to safety. Dependency becomes the currency of connection, and so the individual unconsciously cultivates it in others. True respect for vulnerability does not infantilize it. It does not exploit it. It does not fear it. It allows it to exist without needing to manage it. This neutrality is rare because it requires one to have faced their own helplessness without being consumed by it. How someone treats the dependent, the silent, the unseen. This reveals whether their sense of worth is stable or conditional. If worth is conditional, power must be maintained. If power must be maintained, equality becomes the threatening. This is why some people grow uncomfortable when others become confident, independent, or whole. Their identity depended on imbalance. When balance appears, anxiety follows. The relationship no longer confirms who they believe themselves to be. The psyche clings to familiar roles even when they are painful. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. Watch how someone speaks about those who are absent, especially those who cannot defend themselves. Gossip is not merely social bonding. It is shadow expression. It allows the individual to project disowned traits onto others and experience temporary relief. The content of gossip is revealing. What is emphasized? Weakness, failure, moral flaws, emotional excess. These themes mirror what the individual struggles to accept within themselves. By externalizing them, they preserve a fragile self-image. Projection is the psyche's oldest defense. It protects the ego by relocating discomfort, but it comes at a cost. The more one projects, the less one knows oneself. The inner world becomes fragmented, populated by enemies that are, in truth, reflections. This fragmentation manifests physically. Chronic tension often resides where expression was forbidden. The throat tightens when truth was unsafe. The chest constricts where grief was unwelcome. The jaw hardens where anger had no outlet. The body becomes the archive of everything the mind refused to feel. Trauma is not defined by what happened, but by what could know. Be processed. The unexpressed emotion does not vanish. It lodges itself in muscle, posture, breath. Over time, this embodied memory shapes how the individual moves through the world. Approach, avoidance, posture, gaze. These are not random. They are strategies. And strategies reveal priorities. Notice how a person responds to another's pain when it inconveniences them. Do they listen, but only briefly? Do they become irritated when empathy demands time? Do they intellectualize to avoid feeling? These reactions are subtle, socially acceptable, and deeply telling. Empathy that disappears under inconvenience is not empathy. It is self-image. The unconscious is pragmatic. It values consistency over virtue. If kindness threatens stability, it will be withdrawn. If cruelty reinforces identity, it will be rationalized. The psyche does not ask, "Is this right?" It asks, "Does this keep me intact?" This is why moral outrage often masks unexamined impulses. The louder the condemnation, the more likely something personal is at stake. Intensity without reflection is rarely about justice. It is about displacement. To see character clearly, one must watch what a person permits themselves to do when there are no consequences, when no one is watching, when justification is easy. This is not cynicism. It is psychological realism. The absence of restraint reveals internal regulation. Where there is internal integration, external rules are less necessary. Where there is internal conflict, external control becomes essential. This applies equally to kindness and cruelty. Some individuals require constant reinforcement to behave humanely. Others do so naturally. Not because they are virtuous, but because they are not at war with themselves. Inner conflict always seeks an outlet. If it cannot be resolved internally, it will be enacted relationally. Power becomes a stage on which unresolved dynamics are replayed. This is why authority often distorts character rather than creating it. Authority removes consequences. It amplifies what already exists. The same is true of anonymity, success, and intimacy. Each strips away a layer of performance. The person who becomes more humane with power has integrated their shadow. The one who becomes more cruel has merely been unrestrained. Integration does not mean the absence of dark impulses, it means the capacity to recognize them without acting them out unconsciously. It means knowing where aggression lives within and choosing where it belongs. It means allowing vulnerability without surrendering agency. Such integration begins with the willingness to see oneself without adornment, to notice where pleasure is taken in superiority, where discomfort arises in equality, where relief is felt in another's failure. These observations are unsettling. They threaten the identity the ego has carefully constructed, and so the mind resists, it explains, it deflects, it moralizes, anything to avoid the raw encounter with truth. But truth has weight. It settles into the body. It cannot be talked away indefinitely. Those who refuse this encounter often live with a quiet bitterness, a sense that life is unfair, that others are disappointing, that the world does not meet expectations. This bitterness is the residue of unmet self-recognition. The psyche knows something is wrong, even if the mind cannot articulate it. Those who accept the encounter undergo a different fate, not happiness but solidity. They become less reactive, less defensive. They no longer need to extract worth from dominance or approval. Their behavior becomes simpler, more consistent. They can sit with another's weakness without contempt, with another's strength without envy, with their own darkness without panic. This capacity is not learned from instruction. It is earned through confrontation, through allowing the shadow to speak without letting it rule. And so, when you watch how someone treats the powerless, the inconvenient, the vulnerable, you are not merely observing behavior. You are witnessing the outcome of an internal negotiation that has been ongoing for years, perhaps decades. The psyche is always negotiating between what it fears and what it longs for. Where that negotiation remains unconscious, character is brittle. Where it becomes conscious, character gains depth. This depth is quiet. It does not announce itself, but it can be felt in the absence of cruelty, in the presence of restraint, in the way power is held without hunger, and once seen, it cannot be unseen.